For privacy reasons, names and places have been changed. This story is inspired by true events.
On the evening of August 3, 1991, 7-year-old Emma Rodriguez disappeared from her family's campsite at Pine Ridge Campground in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. Emma had been playing near the family's tent when she vanished without a trace, despite being within sight of her parents just moments before. The disappearance of a young child from a busy campground sent shockwaves through the community and triggered one of the largest search operations in Michigan's history. For 5 years, Emma's fate remained a mystery. Despite extensive searches involving hundreds of volunteers, tracking dogs, helicopters, and specialized rescue teams, no trace of the little girl was ever found. The case haunted investigators and devastated Emma's family, who never stopped believing that their daughter might somehow still be alive. In June 1996, Forest Ranger Daniel Thompson was conducting a routine trail maintenance survey in a remote section of the Hiawatha National Forest when he stumbled upon a discovery that would finally provide answers to Emma's disappearance. Hidden deep in the woods, less than 2 miles from Pine Ridge Campground, Thompson found a carefully concealed shelter that had been occupied for years. Inside, he would uncover evidence that would solve one of Michigan's most heartbreaking missing child cases and expose a truth that no one could have imagined. This is the complete investigation into Emma Rodriguez's disappearance, from the frantic search efforts of 1991 to the shocking discovery that would reveal how a 7-year-old girl had survived alone in the wilderness for 5 years. Chapter 1. The night she disappeared, August 3, 1991, was the second day of what was supposed to be a week-long family camping trip for the Rodriguez family. Carlos Rodriguez, 34, a construction foreman from Grand Rapids, Michigan, had brought his wife Maria, 32, and their 3 children to Pine Ridge Campground for their annual summer vacation. The Rodriguez family had been coming to Pine Ridge Campground for 4 consecutive years. Located in Michigan's Upper Peninsula, about 30 miles west of Munising, the campground offered families a perfect combination of amenities and wilderness access. The facility featured 47 individual campsites, restroom facilities, a small camp store, and direct access to hiking trails in the Hiawatha National Forest. Emma Rodriguez was the middle child of the family, with an older brother Miguel, 10, and a younger sister Sophia, 4. Emma was described by her parents and teachers as an imaginative and independent child who loved exploring nature. She had been camping since she was 3 years old and was comfortable in outdoor environments. The Rodriguez family had established their campsite at Site 23, located in a semi-secluded area near the edge of the campground. The site was surrounded by tall pine trees and offered privacy while still being within easy walking distance of the restroom facilities and camp store. On the morning of August 3rd, the family had spent the day hiking on nearby trails, collecting pine cones, and enjoying typical camping activities. Emma had been particularly excited about spotting a red squirrel during their morning hike and had spent much of the day trying to photograph it with her disposable camera. According to Maria Rodriguez's later testimony, Emma had seemed completely normal throughout the day. She was her usual happy self, Maria told investigators. She was excited about roasting marshmallows that evening and kept asking when we could start the campfire. At approximately 6:30 p.m., Carlos Rodriguez began preparing the evening campfire while Maria organized dinner preparations. The 3 children were playing near the tent, engaged in a game of hide-and-seek among the trees surrounding their campsite. Miguel Rodriguez later told investigators that Emma had been enthusiastic about the game and had found several good hiding spots during their play. Emma was really good at hiding, Miguel said. She could find places where you'd never think to look for her. At 7:15 p.m., Maria called the children for dinner. Miguel and Sophia responded immediately, but Emma didn't appear. Initially, the family assumed she was still hiding and called her name repeatedly, expecting her to emerge giggling from her hiding spot. When Emma didn't respond after several minutes of calling, Carlos and Maria began searching the immediate area around their campsite. They checked behind trees, under picnic tables, and in the family's vehicle, thinking Emma might be playing an extended game of hide-and-seek. By 7:30 p.m., the Rodriguez family's casual search had become urgent. They expanded their search to include neighboring campsites, asking other families if they had seen Emma. Several campers joined the search, checking their own sites and calling Emma's name throughout the campground. The Pine Ridge campground host, retired teacher Dorothy Williams, was notified of Emma's disappearance at 7:45 p.m. Williams immediately began organizing a systematic search of the campground while advising the Rodriguez family to contact local law enforcement. Carlos Rodriguez called the Alger County Sheriff's Office at 8 p.m. to report Emma missing. The call was received by Deputy Sheriff James Morrison, who immediately recognized the urgency of the situation. A missing child in a wilderness area required immediate response and extensive resources. Deputy Morrison arrived at Pine Ridge Campground at 8:30 p.m., just as the sun was beginning to set. He immediately interviewed the Rodriguez family and began coordinating with campground staff to organize a systematic search of the area. The initial search involved approximately 30 people, including other campers, campground staff, and additional sheriff's deputies who had been called to the scene. The searchers used flashlights and called Emma's name continuously, hoping she would respond if she was hiding or had become lost in the surrounding woods. By 10 p.m., with darkness making search efforts dangerous and ineffective, Deputy Morrison made the decision to suspend the search until morning while maintaining a perimeter around the campground to prevent Emma from wandering farther away if she was lost in the immediate area. The first night of Emma's disappearance was agonizing for the Rodriguez family. They maintained a vigil at their campsite, keeping their lanterns burning and calling Emma's name periodically throughout the night, hoping she might find her way back on her own. At first light on August 4th, a full-scale search and rescue operation began. The Michigan State Police were notified, and specialized search teams were requested from throughout the region. The case had officially become one of the largest missing child operations in Michigan's recent history. The expanded search on August 4th included over 100 volunteers, search dogs, and helicopter support from the Michigan National Guard. The search area encompassed the entire campground and extended into the surrounding forest for a radius of approximately 2 miles. Despite the massive effort, the first day of intensive searching produced no evidence of Emma's whereabouts. No clothing, no footprints, no signs of struggle, nothing that could provide investigators with clues about what had happened to the 7-year-old girl. As the search continued into its second day, investigators began considering alternative theories about Emma's disappearance. While the most likely explanation remained that she had become lost in the surrounding wilderness, the possibility of abduction could not be ruled out entirely. The complete absence of any physical evidence was puzzling to experienced search and rescue teams. In most cases involving lost children, searchers would find at least some trace, a piece of clothing, footprints, or evidence of where the child had traveled. Emma seemed to have vanished without leaving any trail whatsoever. Chapter 2: The massive search. The search for Emma Rodriguez intensified dramatically on August 4, 1991, as word of her disappearance spread throughout Michigan and beyond. The Michigan State Police took over coordination of the search effort, bringing with them specialized resources and expertise in missing child cases. Detective Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell was assigned as the lead investigator for the case. With 15 years of experience in missing person investigations, Mitchell immediately recognized that time was critical in finding Emma, especially given the wilderness setting and the child's young age. The search operation was headquartered at the Pine Ridge Campground Visitor Center, which was transformed into a command post with communication equipment, maps, and coordination facilities. Over 200 volunteers had arrived by the second day, including members of search and rescue teams from across Michigan and neighboring states. The search teams were organized into systematic grid patterns that covered every square foot of terrain within a 3-mile radius of the campground. Each team was equipped with radios, GPS units, and detailed topographic maps that ensured no area would be searched twice or left unchecked. The Michigan National Guard provided helicopter support, with aircraft conducting aerial reconnaissance of the vast forested areas surrounding Pine Ridge Campground. The helicopters used loudspeakers to call Emma's name, hoping she might respond if she was lost and scared in the woods. Search dogs played a crucial role in the operation. Teams of bloodhounds and German shepherds trained in tracking missing persons were brought in from across the Midwest. The dogs were given Emma's clothing to establish her scent, then taken to various locations around the campground to attempt to pick up her trail. The search dogs produced contradictory results that puzzled their handlers. Some dogs indicated that Emma's scent led from the campsite toward the forest, while others seemed to lose the trail entirely at the edge of the campground. The inconsistent results suggested that Emma's scent trail had been disrupted or contaminated somehow. On August 6th, the third day of searching, teams expanded their efforts to include all waterways in the area. The Hiawatha National Forest contained numerous streams, ponds, and marshy areas where a child could potentially fall and drown. Dive teams from the Coast Guard searched every body of water within a 5-mile radius of the campground. The water searches were particularly challenging due to the remote and often inaccessible nature of many forest waterways. Divers had to hike considerable distances carrying their equipment to reach some of the more remote ponds and streams that Emma might have encountered if she had wandered into the forest. Despite the exhaustive water searches, no evidence of Emma was found in any of the area's water bodies. This provided some relief to her family, who had feared that drowning might have been responsible for her disappearance. The search effort also included detailed investigation of everyone who had been at Pine Ridge Campground during Emma's disappearance. Detective Mitchell and her team interviewed all registered campers, campground staff, and anyone else who might have been in the area on August 3rd. The interviews revealed that Pine Ridge Campground had been busy during the weekend, with most of the 47 campsites occupied by families on summer vacation. However, none of the campers reported seeing anything suspicious or noticing Emma after the early evening hours when she disappeared. One potentially significant lead emerged from the interviews. A family camping at Site 31, about 200 yards from the Rodriguez campsite, reported hearing what sounded like a child crying in the woods around 8:30 p.m. on August 3rd. However, the sounds had been brief and distant, and the family had assumed it was children from another campsite playing games. The reported crying sounds prompted searchers to focus additional attention on the area near Site 31, but no evidence was found despite intensive searching of the surrounding forest. The sounds could not be definitively linked to Emma's disappearance. By August 8th, the search had been ongoing for 5 days without producing any concrete evidence of Emma's fate. The massive volunteer effort was gradually scaled back as people returned to work and other obligations, though specialized teams continued searching with the support of law enforcement agencies. The Michigan State Police also began investigating the possibility that Emma had been abducted. While there was no evidence to support this theory, the complete absence of any physical trace of Emma in the wilderness made investigators consider all possibilities. The abduction theory led to expanded background checks on everyone who had been at the campground, as well as investigation of any known sex offenders or individuals with histories of crimes against children in the surrounding area. However, these investigations produced no credible suspects or leads. On August 10th, a week after Emma's disappearance, search teams made what initially seemed like a significant discovery. A child's sandal was found approximately 1 mile north of the campground, buried under fallen leaves near a small creek. The sandal appeared to be the right size for Emma and was similar to the type of footwear she had been wearing when she disappeared. However, when the sandal was shown to Emma's parents, they could not definitively confirm that it belonged to their daughter. Forensic analysis of the sandal revealed that it had been exposed to the elements for an extended period, possibly longer than the week since Emma's disappearance. Investigators concluded that the sandal was probably unrelated to Emma's case, though they couldn't rule out the connection entirely. The discovery of the sandal prompted an intensive search of the area where it was found, but no additional evidence was discovered. The false lead was emotionally devastating for the Rodriguez family, who had allowed themselves to hope that it might provide clues about Emma's location. As August 1991 came to an end, the active search for Emma Rodriguez was officially suspended, though the case remained open and active. The decision to end the daily search efforts was made with heavy hearts by law enforcement officials who recognized that continuing the massive operation was no longer sustainable. The Rodriguez family refused to accept that the search was over. They continued to visit the Pine Ridge area every weekend, conducting their own searches and maintaining hope that Emma might somehow still be alive. They also hired a private investigator and consulted with psychics, desperately seeking any avenue that might lead to their daughter. The case received national media attention, with Emma's disappearance featured on television programs and in newspapers across the country. The publicity generated hundreds of tips and reported sightings, but none proved to be credible leads to Emma's whereabouts. As 1991 turned into 1992, Emma Rodriguez's case joined the ranks of Michigan's unsolved missing child cases. Her family continued to believe that she was alive somewhere, while investigators increasingly feared that the 7-year-old had died in the wilderness and that her body might never be found. The massive search effort had covered over 400 square miles of forest and involved more than 500 volunteers over the course of several weeks. Despite this unprecedented effort, Emma Rodriguez had vanished as completely as if she had never existed, leaving behind only questions and heartbreak. Chapter 3: Years of Hope and Desperation. The years following Emma Rodriguez's disappearance were marked by persistent effort from her family to keep the case alive and maintain hope that their daughter might somehow still be alive. The Rodriguez family's refusal to give up became both an inspiration and a source of concern for the community that had supported them during the initial search. Carlos and Maria Rodriguez established a pattern of returning to Pine Ridge Campground every month, conducting their own searches of areas they felt might have been overlooked during the official operation. They became familiar figures to park rangers and other campers, always carrying Emma's photograph and asking if anyone had seen their daughter. The couple also worked tirelessly to keep Emma's case in the public consciousness. They appeared on television programs, gave interviews to newspapers, and distributed thousands of flyers with Emma's photograph throughout Michigan and neighboring states. Their dedication to finding their daughter became legendary among missing children's advocacy groups. In 1992, the family hired private investigator Thomas Ward, a former FBI agent who specialized in missing children cases. Ward spent months reviewing the evidence from Emma's disappearance and conducting his own investigation, but was unable to find any new leads or evidence that had been missed by the original search teams. Ward's investigation did reveal some interesting patterns in Emma's behavior that might have been relevant to her disappearance. According to her parents and brother, Emma had an unusual ability to find hiding places and could remain very still and quiet for extended periods. She also had a fascination with building forts and secret hiding places outdoors. These behavioral patterns led Ward to theorize that Emma might have found an extremely well-concealed hiding place where she had taken shelter, possibly becoming trapped or injured in a location where searchers couldn't find her. However, even this theory couldn't explain how Emma could have survived for more than a few days without food and water. In 1993, 2 years after Emma's disappearance, the case was featured on the television show Unsolved Mysteries. The program included interviews with Emma's family, law enforcement officials involved in the search, and experts in missing children cases. The episode generated over 300 tips from viewers, but none provided useful information about Emma's whereabouts. One tip that seemed particularly promising came from a truck driver who reported seeing a young girl matching Emma's description at a rest stop in Wisconsin in late 1992. The witness was specific enough about the sighting that investigators traveled to Wisconsin to follow up, but the lead ultimately proved to be a case of mistaken identity. The false leads and dead ends were emotionally exhausting for the Rodriguez family. Each tip brought renewed hope followed by crushing disappointment when it didn't pan out. Maria Rodriguez later described this period as living on an emotional roller coaster that never stopped. In 1994, the family received what initially seemed like devastating news. Human remains were discovered in a remote area of the Hiawatha National Forest, approximately 10 miles from Pine Ridge Campground. The remains were those of a young child, leading investigators to fear that Emma's body had finally been found. However, forensic analysis revealed that the remains belonged to a different child entirely, a young Native American girl who had been missing for several decades. While the discovery provided closure for another family, it was another emotional blow for the Rodriguez family, who had prepared themselves for the worst possible news. The discovery of the other child's remains did prompt renewed searching in remote areas of the forest that hadn't been thoroughly examined during the original search for Emma. However, these efforts produced no new evidence related to Emma's case. As 1994 turned into 1995, the Rodriguez family faced increasing pressure from friends and counselors to begin accepting that Emma was probably dead and to begin the grieving process. However, Carlos and Maria continued to insist that they would know if their daughter was dead and that they felt she was still alive somewhere. The family's unwavering belief that Emma was alive was supported by their strong Catholic faith and their conviction that they would somehow sense if their daughter had died. This belief kept them searching when logic suggested that continuing was futile. In early 1995, the family decided to move to Munising, Michigan, to be closer to the area where Emma had disappeared. Carlos found work with a local construction company, and Maria took a part-time job that allowed her to continue searching for Emma on a regular basis. The move to Munising put the family in regular contact with Forest Service personnel and park rangers who worked in the Hiawatha National Forest. The Rodriguez family became well known to Forest Service employees, who were sympathetic to their situation and often provided information about remote areas that might warrant searching. One forest ranger who became particularly involved in the family's ongoing search efforts was Daniel Thompson, a 15-year veteran of the Forest Service who had participated in the original search for Emma in 1991. Thompson was impressed by the family's dedication and occasionally accompanied them on weekend searches when his duties permitted. Ranger Thompson had an extensive knowledge of the Hiawatha National Forest and was familiar with remote areas that were rarely visited by hikers or campers. He understood the forest terrain, wildlife patterns, and the locations of old logging roads, abandoned structures, and natural features that might provide shelter. Throughout 1995 and early 1996, Thompson occasionally suggested new areas for the Rodriguez family to search, based on his knowledge of the forest and his understanding of where a lost child might have gone. These searches were always conducted safely and with proper preparation, as Thompson was careful not to put the family at risk. It was during one of Thompson's routine maintenance patrols in June 1996 that he would make the discovery that would finally solve the mystery of Emma Rodriguez's disappearance. The discovery would not only provide answers but would also validate the Rodriguez family's unwavering belief that their daughter had somehow survived in the wilderness. Thompson's discovery would reveal that Emma Rodriguez had not only survived her initial disappearance but had been living in the forest for nearly 5 years, creating a hidden shelter that had remained undetected despite years of searching by hundreds of people. Chapter 4. The Hidden Shelter. June 18, 1996 was a routine workday for Forest Ranger Daniel Thompson as he conducted a scheduled trail maintenance survey in a remote section of the Hiawatha National Forest. Thompson was checking the condition of an old logging road that had been converted to a hiking trail, documenting areas that needed repair or vegetation clearing. The area where Thompson was working was approximately 1.8 miles northeast of Pine Ridge Campground, in a section of forest that was rarely visited by hikers due to its distance from established trails and lack of notable scenic features. The terrain was moderately difficult, with dense undergrowth and several small ravines created by seasonal water runoff. At approximately 2:30 p.m., while checking a section of trail that had been overgrown by fallen trees, Thompson noticed something unusual about 50 yards off the main path. What initially appeared to be a natural formation of rocks and fallen logs seemed too regular and organized to be entirely natural. Thompson's experience in the forest had taught him to recognize signs of human activity, even when they were well concealed. The arrangement of materials he was observing showed patterns that suggested deliberate construction rather than natural occurrence. Curious about what he had found, Thompson carefully made his way through the undergrowth toward the suspicious formation. As he got closer, he realized he was looking at a carefully constructed shelter that had been camouflaged to blend in with the surrounding forest. The shelter was approximately 8 feet long and 5 feet wide, built into a natural depression in the ground and covered with a framework of branches, bark, and moss. The construction was sophisticated enough that it would be virtually invisible to anyone passing more than a few yards away. Thompson immediately recognized that this was not the work of casual campers or hikers. The shelter showed signs of long-term occupancy and had been built with considerable skill and knowledge of wilderness survival techniques. Most importantly, the construction style suggested it had been built by someone with small hands and limited physical strength. As Thompson examined the shelter more closely, he noticed evidence of recent occupation: a small fire pit with cold ashes, containers for collecting rainwater, and what appeared to be food storage areas. The shelter had clearly been someone's home for an extended period. Thompson called out to announce his presence, thinking that whoever had built the shelter might be nearby. When he received no response, he carefully approached the entrance to the shelter, which was concealed by a carefully arranged curtain of branches and leaves. Inside the shelter, Thompson found evidence that would immediately solve one of Michigan's most baffling missing child cases. The interior was organized like a small dwelling, with sleeping areas, storage spaces, and personal belongings that clearly belonged to a child. Most significantly, Thompson found Emma Rodriguez's disposable camera, the one she had been using to photograph squirrels on the day before her disappearance. The camera was carefully stored in a makeshift container that had protected it from moisture, along with other personal items that the Rodriguez family would later identify as belonging to Emma. Thompson also found evidence of Emma's survival skills and resourcefulness. The shelter contained tools made from forest materials, containers fashioned from natural materials for collecting and storing water, and evidence of food preservation techniques that had allowed Emma to survive on wild plants, nuts, and berries. The most remarkable discovery was a collection of marks on the shelter walls that appeared to be Emma's attempts to keep track of time. The marks suggested that Emma had been living in the shelter for nearly 5 years, having somehow survived alone in the wilderness since her disappearance in 1991. However, the shelter was currently unoccupied, and there was no immediate sign of Emma's whereabouts. The evidence suggested that she had been using the shelter regularly but might be away from it at the moment, possibly gathering food or water from other locations in the forest. Thompson immediately radioed his discovery to Forest Service headquarters, who contacted the Alger County Sheriff's Office and the Michigan State Police. Within hours, a team of investigators and search specialists had assembled at the shelter site to examine the evidence and begin looking for Emma. The investigation of the shelter revealed an astonishing story of survival and adaptation. Emma had apparently wandered away from the campground on the night of her disappearance and had become lost in the forest. Instead of panicking, she had used survival skills she had learned from camping with her family to find shelter and begin adapting to life in the wilderness. Over the course of 5 years, Emma had gradually improved and expanded her shelter, learning to find food and water, avoid dangerous animals, and survive through Michigan's harsh winters. The evidence suggested that she had become an expert at living off the forest's natural resources. The discovery of Emma's shelter prompted an immediate search of the surrounding area. Search teams were organized to look for Emma herself, who was presumably somewhere in the vicinity but had not been at the shelter when Thompson found it. The search for Emma was complicated by the fact that she had now been living in the wilderness for 5 years and might be fearful of human contact. Search teams were instructed to approach carefully and non-threateningly, calling Emma's name and identifying themselves as friends who wanted to help her. On the evening of June 19th, approximately 24 hours after the shelter was discovered, search teams found Emma Rodriguez alive in the forest about half a mile from her hidden shelter. The 12-year-old girl who had been missing for nearly 5 years was finally coming home. Emma's reunion with her family would be emotional and complex, as she had spent nearly half her life living alone in the wilderness and had adapted to a completely different way of life. Her survival story would become one of the most remarkable cases of wilderness survival in American history. Chapter 5. The incredible survival story. The discovery of Emma Rodriguez on the evening of June 19, 1996 marked the end of one of the most extraordinary missing person cases in American history. The 12-year-old girl who had vanished at age 7 was found sitting by a small creek, approximately half a mile from the shelter where she had lived for nearly 5 years. Search team leader Captain Robert Hayes later described the moment they found Emma. "She looked up at us when we called her name, but she didn't seem surprised or frightened. It was almost like she had been expecting us to find her eventually. She just said, 'I'm Emma,' very quietly, like she remembered her own name but hadn't used it in a long time." Emma's physical condition was remarkably good considering her years in the wilderness. She was smaller than normal for her age, indicating some malnutrition, but she was alert, mobile, and showed no signs of serious injury or illness. Her survival in Michigan's wilderness through 5 winters was unprecedented for a child her age. The reunion between Emma and her parents was emotional but complicated. Emma remembered her family, but 5 years of isolation had changed her behavior and communication patterns significantly. She spoke very quietly, seemed uncomfortable with physical contact, and appeared overwhelmed by the presence of so many people. Emma was immediately transported to Munising General Hospital for medical evaluation. Patricia Williams, the pediatrician who examined her, found that despite some malnutrition and minor health issues, Emma was in surprisingly good condition. Her survival instincts had clearly developed to an extraordinary degree, Dr. Williams noted. Over the following days, as Emma gradually became more comfortable communicating, the full story of her remarkable survival began to emerge. Through careful interviews with child psychologists and investigators, Emma revealed how she had managed to survive alone in the wilderness for nearly 5 years. According to Emma's account, she had wandered away from the family campsite on the evening of August 3, 1991, while playing hide and seek. She had found what she thought was an excellent hiding place in the forest but had become disoriented and unable to find her way back to the campsite. Emma had heard the searchers calling her name during the first few days after her disappearance, but she had been too scared and confused to respond. By the time she might have tried to return to the campground, she was too lost to find her way back and had decided to focus on survival instead. Her initial survival had been aided by knowledge she had gained from camping with her family and from nature programs she had watched on television. Emma had remembered basic principles about finding shelter, locating water sources, and identifying edible plants. The first shelter Emma had constructed was crude and temporary, but she had gradually improved her building skills over the months and years. The sophisticated shelter that Ranger Thompson had discovered was actually the 4th version she had built, each one more advanced than the previous. Emma's diet had consisted primarily of wild berries, nuts, edible plants, and occasionally fish she had caught in forest streams. She had learned through trial and error which plants were safe to eat and had developed techniques for preserving food during abundant seasons to help her survive the winter months. Surviving Michigan's winters had been the greatest challenge Emma faced. She had learned to insulate her shelter with layers of bark, leaves, and moss, and had developed techniques for maintaining body heat during the coldest months. She had also learned to store food and manage her limited resources during periods when fresh food was unavailable. Emma's social development had been significantly affected by her years of isolation. She had difficulty with normal conversation and seemed uncomfortable in groups of people. However, she had maintained her intelligence and had even developed enhanced observational skills and environmental awareness. The investigation into how Emma had remained undetected for 5 years revealed several factors that had contributed to her successful concealment. Her shelter was located in an area that was rarely visited by hikers, and she had become expert at camouflaging her presence and avoiding detection when people were in the area. Emma had also developed acute hearing and awareness of human presence, allowing her to hide whenever searchers or hikers came near her shelter. During the massive search operation in 1991, she had remained hidden and silent, too scared to reveal herself to the strangers calling her name. Child psychologist Dr. Michael Stevens, who worked with Emma during her recovery, noted that her survival demonstrated remarkable intelligence and adaptability. Emma essentially had to reinvent civilization for herself as a child, Dr. Stevens observed. Her ability to learn and adapt to her environment was extraordinary. The case raised important questions about wilderness survival education and search and rescue techniques. Emma's ability to remain hidden during extensive search operations highlighted the challenges of finding someone who is actively avoiding detection, even if they are close to search areas. Emma's family faced the challenge of helping their daughter readjust to civilization after 5 years of wilderness living. The process required patience, understanding, and professional support as Emma gradually relearned social skills and adapted to indoor living. The Rodriguez family decided to maintain some connection to the outdoors in Emma's recovery process, understanding that nature had become fundamental to her identity. They purchased property near the forest where Emma had lived, allowing her to maintain some connection to the environment where she had survived. Emma's story attracted national media attention and became the subject of books, documentaries, and academic studies about wilderness survival and child psychology. Her case provided valuable insights into human adaptability and the psychological effects of extended isolation. The discovery of Emma's shelter also led to improvements in search and rescue techniques, particularly regarding the importance of checking areas that might provide long-term shelter rather than focusing only on locations where someone might be lost or injured. Today, Emma Rodriguez's survival story remains one of the most remarkable cases of wilderness survival in American history. Her experience demonstrated the incredible adaptability of children and the importance of never giving up hope in missing person cases, no matter how much time has passed. Final thoughts. Emma Rodriguez's reunion with her family in 1996 marked the beginning of a long and complex recovery process. Her story of 5-year wilderness survival became legendary in missing person and wilderness survival communities, providing hope for other families facing similar situations. Emma's readjustment to civilization took several years and required extensive support from psychologists, educators, and medical professionals. While she successfully reintegrated into society, her experience in the wilderness had permanently changed her perspective on life and her relationship with the natural world. The Rodriguez family became advocates for improved wilderness safety education and search and rescue techniques. They worked with the Forest Service to develop better protocols for searching remote areas and for understanding how missing persons might survive in wilderness environments. Emma's shelter site was preserved by the Forest Service as an educational resource and testament to human survival instincts. The location serves as a reminder that even in the most challenging circumstances, the will to survive can overcome seemingly impossible odds. The case fundamentally changed how search and rescue teams approach missing person cases in wilderness areas, emphasizing the importance of considering long-term survival scenarios and checking areas that might provide ongoing shelter rather than focusing solely on immediate danger zones. Emma Rodriguez's story continues to inspire wilderness survival enthusiasts, missing children advocates, and anyone facing seemingly insurmountable challenges. Her 5-year survival in Michigan's wilderness stands as proof that human determination and adaptability can triumph over even the most daunting circumstances.